The shadow outside the window. It had been a long day for Jake. He sat on the couch, staring at the flickering television screen that only seemed to show static. It was one of those nights where everything felt off. The sky outside his apartment was a dark canvas of storm clouds, and the air was thick with humidity, as though the storm was about to break. Yet everything around him felt still, like the calm before some inevitable creeping disaster. Jake wasn't the superstitious type. He had always been a man of reason, of science, of logic. But for the last few nights, something had been happening. Subtle at first, almost like a whisper on the wind. It started with small, almost imperceptible sounds, scratching noises on the walls, faint tapping, like something, or someone, was trying to get in. He shook it off at first. It was probably just the pipes or the wind howling outside. But as the days went by, the noises grew louder, more insistent. Sometimes he'd wake up in the middle of the night, his heart racing, as though something or someone was right there in the room with him. Jake wasn't sure when exactly it happened, but one evening, while he was sitting at his desk, his eyes wandered toward the window. And that's when he saw it. A shadow. A dark, impossible figure standing just outside his window. It was tall but featureless, with no clear shape or form. The only thing that stood out was its movement. It wasn't quite human. It lingered for a moment, before vanishing as quickly as it had appeared. Jake jumped to his feet and rushed to the window, but there was nothing out there. No one, just the empty street and the sound of rain starting to patter on the pavement. He rubbed his eyes and tried to laugh it off. "Maybe I'm just tired," he muttered to himself. "Maybe it's just the stress getting to me." But the next night, it happened again. This time the shadow was there for longer, and it seemed to be watching him, its presence so palpable that Jake's stomach churned with unease. He couldn't explain it, but he knew something was wrong. He could feel it. The next day he called his buddy Mark. Mark had always been into weird stuff, ghost stories, paranormal phenomena, anything that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. "Man, I don't know what's going on," Jake said, his voice shaky. "There's something out there. I keep seeing this shadow outside my window. It's like it's watching me." Mark laughed on the other end of the line. "What? You've been drinking too much again, Jake? It's probably just your imagination. You've been working late, right?" Jake paused for a moment. "Yeah, but it's not just that. It feels real. Too real." Mark's tone shifted, more serious now. Alright. Listen, I'll come over tonight. Let's set up some cameras. We'll see if we can catch whatever it is." By the time night fell, Mark had arrived with his gear. A couple of high-end cameras and some night vision equipment. They set everything up, placed cameras in different corners of Jake's apartment, and waited. Mark was laughing, making jokes about catching ghosts on film, but Jake could barely crack a smile. He was on edge, his nerves frayed. Around 3 a.m. a loud bang echoed through the apartment. Jake shot up from the couch, his heart hammering in his chest. He looked around, his eyes darting to the windows, the door, the shadows in the corners of the room. Mark jumped up too, grabbing his camera. "What was that?" Jake hissed, his voice low. Mark didn't respond. He was already flipping through the footage on his camera. What he saw made his blood run cold. The screen showed a shadow, one that wasn't there when they'd set up the cameras, moving across the room. It wasn't the same shadow from outside though. This one seemed to float, its form twisting unnaturally as it moved closer to the camera. "Jesus Christ," Jake whispered. He stumbled back, his legs feeling weak. But it wasn't just the cameras. Jake could see it now, with his own eyes. The shadow was in the room with them. It seemed to stretch out from the walls, moving like liquid, as though it wasn't bound by the laws of physics. "Mark," Jake whispered, his voice barely audible. "What the hell is that?" Mark didn't answer. He was staring at the screen, his face pale, his mouth dry. The shadow seemed to grow larger, more distinct, and then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it vanished. But Jake could feel its presence. It was still there, lingering just beyond the corner of his vision. The next few days were a blur. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that the shadow was always around him. When he looked out his window, it was there. When he turned on his lights, it was lurking just outside, its form shifting in the darkness. He started to notice it more and more. Its presence grew stronger with each passing hour. It would follow him wherever he went, at work, at home, even when he tried to get some sleep. It wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside his mind, worming its way into his thoughts. It knew him, knew everything about him. Jake tried everything to escape. He packed his things, drove to a friend's house, stayed at a hotel, but wherever he went, the shadow followed. It wasn't just outside his window anymore. It was in his dreams, in his waking thoughts, a constant oppressive weight on his chest. He couldn't outrun it. It was too late. One evening, while standing on his balcony staring out at the street below, Jake realized the truth. The shadow wasn't just following him, it was part of him. It had always been there, watching, waiting. He was never alone. It had been with him his entire life, and now it was coming for him, coming to claim him. The shadow outside the window was not a stranger. It was him, and as the storm raged outside, Jake knew one thing for sure. There was no escape. The shadow had won.